Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 22nd February Cabinet. And I'll get straight to the large agenda tonight and the important events. Apologies for absence. No apologies for absence. And minutes of the previous meeting of the 11th of January. Cabinet, do we have any comments? No? Can we adopt them? Thank you very much. I have matters of urgent business. I have none to report tonight. Declarations of any interest. Members? No. Anyone? Officers? No. Excellent. Thank you very much. And I'll move to my statement. Thank you. I welcome you all tonight to Cabinet, especially quite a few people here tonight, some of them have been in the audience and some other non-executive members. Thank you for coming tonight. Tonight's meeting is about a new start and about correcting the errors of the last 25 years and setting out a path for the next 25 years. I won't speak about details of Councillor Snell and the 151 officers' budget tonight's papers just now, but I wanted to say what this Cabinet meeting is. This meeting is inevitable but needs to reset Thurrock. The budget moves towards having been a council with still below the average council rate, but much improved, while adding funds to the budget that we need to see people's services. Thurrock has always had tax that was too low to pay for services that we need to deliver for local people. Some of about the facts of the average home of a band C is not a band D. Oh, I'm going to say that again. Some of the facts: an average home in Thurrock is a band C and not a band D. Some of successive administrations are not willing to increase taxes enough. Some of it's about the government incentives not to increase tax. But in the past, our decisions has been a simple one. Do we make a modest increase now and still keep us to the cheapest in Essex? Or do we repeat these mistakes of the past and give away another £8.5 million? I understand the Labour's pledge to fight the council into this, so they have repeated their mistakes over the past 25 years and keep this council too late to maintain its services. By doing so, they're imposing an extra £8.5 million this year. The Conservatives will take a tough decision to fix this. We'll ask a tax increase that would still give us a tax rate that would other councils envy, but we still means to grow the tax base and therefore make public services more sustainable. Let me be clear. The decision not to increase means there is no future for the Thurrock as a standalone council. How will opposition pay for the social care? How will officers pay for a new theatre? How will officers pay for bins? How will officers pay to their great new staff next year? If they're serious about running the council, they should look at the budget instead of playing to the gallery. Being no doubt, this is a choice. An average tax rate is sustainable to a council with the Conservatives, or political point scoring and an imminent death of the council that we all love. Can we move on? Briefings, policy and budget and other issues. Comments? Councillor Maney.
Thank you, Leader. I just wanted to say very quickly that Councillor Jeffreys and I had a meeting with officers to discuss Buckles Lane and options for dealing with the unauthorised development there earlier today. It's clear we need to make some tough decisions around our approach to that, and we've asked for a paper to be brought to Cabinet sooner rather than later so that we can have a discussion and set some direction. I just wanted to mention it tonight because, as I said, we've asked for it to come quite quickly, so there may not be much time for members to have foresight of it before it appears on the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Maney. Any other comments? Okay. Petitions submitted by members of the public.
No petitions submitted.
Questions from non-executive members.
No questions submitted.
And as there's non-executive members here, do they wish to just add a question without, because of my policy from last year? Any? I'm looking, John. No. Okay. The offer's there. Matters referred to Cabinet to be consideration by overall scrutiny committees. And I see none. There is none here from any over scrutiny, so we can move on. We then move to the draft, item 10, draft general fund budget 23-24. I think Councillor Snell starting, and then the 151 officer coming afterwards. Thank you. Look forward to it.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, I shall start, and I'll hand over to the Section 151 officer afterwards. So, a bit of context. The Q2 financial report presented to Cabinet on the 14th of December 22 highlighted a gross funding gap of 469 million for 22-23 and a further gap of 184 million in 23-24. This confirmed the need for exceptional financial support from government and led to the Section 151 officer issuing a Section 114 notice on the 19th of December 22. This council was in an extremely serious financial position, and the difficulties we face in addressing this issue cannot be underestimated. The current estimates for 23-24 show a budget requirement of 35% greater than that provided by current sources of funding available to the council. The draft budget presented for consideration today is set on the assumption that the EFS request is granted, thus enabling a balanced budget to be set. However, and I have to make this very clear, that the EFS being granted is not a given at this time. In order to secure it, we must take all available steps to mitigate the financial deficit, both right now and on into future years. That work has already begun and is ongoing. Indeed, the Council has developed a 20-year financial strategy to consider a range of assumptions to tackle the ongoing deficit position. Those assumptions have been made with reference to comparable local authorities and include such things as looking at variable council tax rates, collection rates, asset disposals and the application of MRP to reflect proposed new policy. There is more of this in the budget report and the Treasury management strategy, which I'm sure you've all read, so I don't need to go into it any further. I can't talk further about this year's budget without really mentioning inflation, which substantially impacts on the MTFS. Currently running at just around 10%, it's having a significant impact on our financial position. Taking our gas and electricity bills as an example, between 22-23 and 23-24, year-on-year increases are on average 196% for gas and 100% for electricity. Petrol and diesel prices have also increased by 8.9% and 22% respectively, and leading to increased running costs for our council vehicles. Inflation is adding cost pressure throughout this budget and will be monitored carefully throughout 23-24. For 23-24, the gross expenditure incurred by the delivery of council services is 511.864 million. After taking income and specific grants into account, the net cost of services comes to 327.647 million. The 180.159 million shortfall in available funding will require exceptional government support, and this equates to 56% of the overall funding requirement. So, to the 23-24 main proposals. As you know, the government allowed for local authorities to raise core council tax by 3% without a referendum, plus an additional 2% for adult social care. On the 6th of February, we were granted permission by the Levelling Up Minister to raise tax by an extra 5% without a referendum, meaning a total of 10%. We have carried out an assessment of current council tax levels with our peer group comparator authorities. This demonstrates that our Band D council tax level is 11.6% lower than our peer group of authorities. If the peer group authorities continue to raise council tax to the referendum limit, Thurrock will continue to raise significantly less income than our peer group. And why is this the case? This is because Thurrock has historically not always raised rates to the referendum level, leaving us with a significant shortfall in income. So, with all this in mind, for 23-24, we are proposing that council tax is set as follows. Council tax, core council tax, 7.99%, and the adult social care precept of 2%, which will leave a total of 9.99%. For a Band D property, this would represent an increase in council tax of £143.91 this year. Now, it's important to understand that even with this rise, this does not make us a high tax council. We are still the lowest council tax authority in Essex. Also, recognising that we are currently in a cost of living crisis, we propose creating a hardship fund of £616,000 to further help those families struggling the most. This will be in addition to the assistance provided by a local council tax scheme which we agreed in full council recently. I must make clear again that all of the figures laid out in the proposed budget assume that the council agrees the 9.99% council tax for 23-24. So that's crucial that we do that. Just a quick word on non-domestic rates, because it often comes up in conversations about why can't we do something about non-domestic rates. Currently, a levy applies to any additional business rates the council receives above a nationally set baseline. It is estimated that non-domestic rates of 23-24 will bring in around 47.6 million, which is an increase of 7.8 million on the previous year. There is an opportunity to potentially join a business rates pool with other local authorities, which does bring associated financial benefits. It is subject to legislative agreement and a formal application at the central government, but this is something we're going to be looking at, and we'll be going further into that in 24-25. So the budget presented here today is a balanced one, assuming we are granted EFS by the government. It is true to say that it is a challenging budget. There's no getting away from that, it is. We will need to transform this organisation to enable us to achieve realistic and sustainable outcomes, sustainable being the operative word. It has to be sustainable. We have to stop thinking about the short term. We've all been guilty of that down the years, and begin planning a long-term sustainability plan. In fact, that has already begun. The challenges facing this council are many, but this budget is the first step on the road to recovery. All we've got to do is take that first step. So I'll leave that one there. There's more in the papers, but I'll hand over to Jonathan for some more technical detail. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Really, the leader and yourself have emphasised the key point that we need to make here is that as a council, it's very much for us to demonstrate that we've taken on board the scale of the issue, that issue is understood, and really that as a council, we contribute to resolving the problem to the extent we are able to in the current context. And that context is moving all of the time. So in addition to some of the things that Councillor Snell's mentioned in that summary, we face some underlying fragility in our budget prior to this, and they're reflected in our MTFS, which broadly in Appendix 1 sets out the budget as proposed. We have one-off measures that we've had to reverse. We have savings to deliver, and we will have more savings to deliver. We've got growth and pressures in the current year that have exceeded what was expected last year. So our core service pressure, alongside the additional core resource, is already outweighing that income. And this is then obviously exasperated by the wider issues with investments that we've talked about in various of these forums leading up to this point. The gap we're left with is that 180 million, and that is still fragile in itself. So it's still reliant on interest rates, hopefully not going any higher. We've got a current projection in from our Treasury advisors, but that obviously is open to change and obviously emphasises the need for divestment of both physical assets that the authority own and the investment assets. Our MRP charges remain high and will remain high again until we divest of assets. So we have a budget with a 180 million gap, but within that there's still additional risk and the need to take action swiftly to resolve issues. And I think in setting a council tax at the higher end of the scale where we've asked for flexibility as a council, it is a demonstration to government that in exchange for hopefully their support to the tune of 180 million and plus the 452 million projected in the current year, that the additional contribution we make shows that we are taking that additional step to do so. The exposure to risk continues to be a problem for us, and the scale of the challenge of achieving that financial sustainability is stark. But we are fortunate to be inside a mechanism that enables us to assess that on an ongoing basis. And members here will know we are looking at that 20-year model. We are looking at all the options, and really part of demonstrating the need to make our contribution to that deficit is really to enable that ongoing dialogue to happen with our commissioners, with the department, because the situations will change and evolve, and we need to be in a position to take action when we can, but also to see what happens. We don't know what's going to happen in terms of some of our investments. We hope there's a resolution, for example, in the solar assets this year. That will have a significant impact, and we need to consider all of these things alongside the additional pieces of work we're doing, which will also have impacts through reviews of capital programmes, fees and charges, etc., which are all coming together to consider that financial sustainability question. We're at a very early stage, really, in this process. It's only 6 months now, really, that we've taken this forward. We've made huge steps to understand that problem. But there will be further solutions that come forward. There will be new voices involved, new thoughts involved, and our commissioners have had huge involvement in helping navigate to this point and understand that problem, because until you understand it, you cannot resolve it. We are currently below that peer group. Council tax rises are never simple, but it is important to understand that part of the reason for that was our investment strategy enabled residents to enjoy a lower council tax. So although the consequence of the situation we're in will change that, it is within a context of a low base starting point, and as Councillor Snell referenced, there is definitely consideration of the wider hardship that may cause certain specific vulnerable groups, and action is being taken to address that specifically, and it's really important that these decisions are taken in that context. As noted, our core funding remains insufficient, and this is a key factor within that. The business rates pooling is another good example. We are exploring all options to look at funding sources, and ultimately that will be another contribution through to the position. So the Section 25 statement included at Appendix 8, rightly, is an unusual Section 25 statement. It's an unusual situation. Normally we're commenting as Section 151 officers on the robustness of the budget, which is normally a balanced budget. We're commenting on the robustness of a budget supported by £180 million of assumed funding. We can only assume that funding if we take the actions required as a council. And if we don't take that action, then we're not sure where we will be. And as the leader referenced at the start, that future is exceptionally uncertain. So I would very much stress the need to use this intervention process positively, as we've been doing to date. Use all of the advice and support that's available within that mechanism, and has enabled us to get very quickly to this position. And we cannot say there's certainty on our future financial sustainability, but we can say we've got the mechanism to fully understand it, take every action we can, and work with key partners at central government and with our commissioners to take action and appropriate steps, keep people updated on the position, and fully inform you as members as to what the future of the council looks like in that context. So I'll stop there.
Any other members want to comment? I'll start with a comment for myself, and then I'll comment. But I'd like to reiterate that the issue that I was saying right at the beginning here, it's not about 4.99 or 9.99. This is about whether we want a council, the Thurrock Borough Council here at this point. And this is going to be one of the biggest decisions of our lives tonight, and an even bigger decision next week when if the recommendation goes through here. Like, it's not that. I've taken tough decisions when new cabinet put me in charge, in my group, and we got voted in. I got voted at council, so as member leader, take tough decisions. This is one of the toughest decisions you want to say to be heard. Like, I'm up for election this year and I'm making the decision to increase it, but that's the right thing to do. And I've said the same thing over and again. Tough decisions are the right thing to do, and this is the right thing to do here, because I want to see a council and have them make them decisions in this 49 not just after the 1st, 2nd of March. I want to make them decisions for the next 10 years, 20 years. So the next person sitting here, these people sitting around this room here making cabinet decisions and members' decisions, can still have a Thurrock council that can live and survive and thrive and improve with a new Freeport coming down our way, the new investment strategies. There's ideas here, and I'm taking this as a restart and a new way. I want to see a great cultural opportunities. I want to see some great new investments. I want to see the updated state cinema and taking invention, making a new high street, new Tilbury Towns Board, Grays Towns Board. I want to see a new Purfleet. All of that, it can't happen if we don't have enough money to pay our great staff here to do that great work, and that will be taken out of our hands into whatever happens. And I don't know what will happen. And that's the starkness of this. But too long, people have missed this. And I'm thinking, this council tax rise tonight still means we've missed these opportunities over 11 years. Nearly £50 million and compounded, I believe, has not come into the coffers of this council over the last 10 years because we haven't gone to the referendum limit. That still means council tax is £140 cheaper if we did take them decisions over the previous administrations over the last 10 years. So that's what we've got to do. I'm proud of what this budget's coming forward here, and I'm supporting it wholeheartedly. And that's what should happen. Councillor Spillman.
I just ask Jonathan a couple of questions, just to make a few comments. So the actual, forgetting the debts and the interest and any impairments from the investments, if you take out the investment income, I think it's worth noting, if you could tell us, what's the actual sort of structural deficit between the income this council creates and the statutory and non-statutory expenditure that we have at the moment?
So in our MTFS, before you bring into the interest cost investment income, as you say, in MRP, we're showing a 17.7 million pressure, which is the difference between our income sources, our ongoing inflationary pressures, our reversal of one-off measures, the growth in service demand, and netted off with our current planned level of savings. Obviously, the hope is to then deliver further on fees and charges, further on savings, and potentially impact on the capital programme, and that may reduce that gap somewhat, but I would expect there's still a significant gap, and that's where we're starting from.
And so, I mean, that gap is, if I'm correct, is a result of many years of us not raising this council, in different administrations, both red and blue, not raising council tax enough to cover that, and that gap has grown, has it?
Yes, so cumulatively, every year you don't raise to the referendum limit, that effectively becomes built into your base, and so you don't get that through to the next year and the next year. So yes, as you say, the history of the unitary will be the sum of those decisions. Yeah,
I mean, for me, the reason why I support this budget is because, our number one, if we're going to be responsible members across the chamber, really, our number one concern has got to be for viability of a future council has got to be closing that structural deficit, because although the impairments and interest is going to change significantly as we sell assets. Some assets may get sold for more than we think. Some assets might get sold for less than we think. But the one constant that we have at the moment is that we have to close that structural deficit. Now, we closed that for several years due to income investment. That income investment's now disappeared, and so from my perspective, I see no other option. The only reasonable decision to take and the only responsible decision to take is to take immediate action to close that structural deficit. It wouldn't matter whether we were running a convenience store, a pub, a multi-million pound FTSE, billion pound FTSE 100 company, or a council. Closing that structural deficit is the only responsible course of action. And failure to do that is a path to, oblivion, really.
Any other members want to comment or ask a question? Councillor Arnold.
Thank you. A comment really around, I think Councillor Spillman's just about hit the nail on the head there with where we need to be. Frontline care costs, costs for staff, costs for residential care, costs for equipment, cost of supplies, materials to those care packages. Thurrock's not in a bubble of special pricing. We're having to pay those increases and pay those prices that all other boroughs are having to pay, but we're not bringing in enough. I mean, Councillor Spillman's explained it very well there. That if I was living in another borough, the amount that my tax is going to go up each month is about £14, I think. But if I look at other boroughs and those around me in Essex even, that would be double. It would be £28. So, and our costs are the same. You know, the number of people that we're caring for is similar. So the precept, the 2% adult social care precept will bring in about 1.5 million. But we've got a pressure of between 3, nearly 4 million, maybe up to 6 million with the way that the pricing structure is going and the cost of care. We've got children with special needs that will become teenagers, that will become adults. So our demographic of people living longer, more people needing extra care, that doesn't stop because we're in Thurrock. So the responsible thing for me to do is to support this budget and grit our teeth and recognise that we've been almost living, not a dream, but we've been living above our means as residents in this borough maybe for the types of services we want to continue to support. So I'm all in agreement with this. I think we just have to do it.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Spillman again.
If we were to raise council tax by just the 4.99 and the commissioners were okay with that and still provided the funding, what would the gap be financially between 4.99 and 9.99?
So broadly, it's about another 2.3 million.
And where do you envisage that we would be sort of set in the sort of departments we'd be looking at cutting if we had to find that extra income that we weren't getting in?
I think the key for me on it is it's more about our intent in the first place. But beyond that, obviously, there's a wider current planned significant transformation programme coming. So that is going to look at all areas of the council. So what we've got currently is effectively a holding position that we've been able to identify a range of savings relatively quickly to contribute to the gap and demonstrate again we're taking that action as a council. But the wider piece of work obviously involves a more detailed fundamental review of some of the things Councillor Arnold's been talking about. It's about how our residents access our services fundamentally and how many times they access our services, and ultimately managing within that increasing cost base alongside that. So I think it's fair to say there's kind of quick wins here, but the fundamental change that's required to come back to your point about ultimately being financially sustainable between our income and expenditure is that significant piece of work. That will have to happen whether it's 4.99 or 9.99. The issue we've got is that the 180 gap requiring exceptional support sends a completely different message to government. And then as a council, we're not sure whether we can access that.
Just I mean, my concern is that again, going back to that structural deficit rather than the wider questions that are obviously just as relevant, is that having sat through a lot of the meetings we've had on savings, I view Thurrock as quite a lean council, and my concern is if we were to cut, if we were not to raise council tax to where we are, and we were to lose that extra 2.9 or what was it again, sorry? 2.3 million, then we'd be having to put statutory services that in some ways are, life and death at risk. And so for that reason, it's not something I can countenance. Again, I don't think it's a responsible thing to do.
Just saying that it's not just that, it's actually the compound of that. We just discussed over the last 10 years when people have not taken that, there's nearly £50 million that we've missed. And I just adding up compound on that could come by 2030, which we all know 2030, and it should be no surprise to the 49 councillors. By 2030, this may not be in existence of council because of that structural deficit that we've had ongoing and this increase of adult social care over. And I'm adamant that when I was the leader, I've got to correct that and make sort of Thurrock survive regardless of the investment issues that are really writ large. We've got to have a council that can afford and pay its way. I'm an good old Thatcherite that if you can't afford it, you walk along and cut your cloth to it. And at the end of the week, your shopping basket's got to be right. Make sure you manage your budget, and that's what we've got to do here. We've got to manage our budget and use this as an opportunity to reset and start managing our budget correctly. Missing out on another by 2030, another 25 to 30 million pounds compounded is huge. And that person sitting here in 25, because it almost certainly won't be me, 2030, at least we know that tonight I've done something for the Borough of Thurrock, and in 2030 the leader and the cabinet sitting around here can actually have some different conversations of a new restarted Thurrock. Councillor Bass.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you for your report. So obviously I will be supporting this not to kind of protect my political face, but to protect our residents, to protect the key services, and to protect the future of our borough. So I just need some more clarification. Obviously, we are maybe making more savings. We are increasing this council tax. At 3.9, you have just mentioned approving this budget, members will need to expect further adjustments. Can you please elaborate more on this? Thank you.
I'm happy to elaborate because actually it's in the Commissioner's comments too, so I think it might be worth being very clear what the Commissioner's position is and what may impact on the conditions that come back from the Minister on your request for exceptional financial support, so they're not in isolation. So we highlight, I think it's paragraph 4.2, that there is some further work to be done, but I do want to context that there's already been a lot of work done to get to this position, and I think you can agree it's a very detailed and thorough budget, but it's a pragmatic budget. There was still pending work at the point this budget was set. So the three areas I'd particularly like to highlight: by Q1, there needs to be a review of fees and charges that will come back to Cabinet. The second part is there needs to be a fuller review of capital. So there has been a review of capital, and that's now fully disclosed in this budget, the projects and programmes. But particularly, given mine to Section 114, there is a requirement to go through that completely and come back and identify if there is any further potential for identifying savings. And the final one is actually, this budget, it's a point in time, but the activity does not stop here, as I think the leader had spoke to. You will still, during 23-4, be looking for further savings. I think your probably next key moment in that is probably Q2, so halfway through the year, and that picks up the point that Jonathan had made about transformation. But I do want to link this back to the exceptional financial support request, because that is not a sum of money without conditions. And let's see what the response is back from the Minister in hopefully the next few days. You certainly need it before you go to Council with your full budget, but it will come with conditions. The other condition that may come with that is also your disposal programme, and I think the report's very clear on highlighting out your anticipated capital receipts in year. But that I expect would be a normal condition of the letter. Just finally, I want to point out, it's not directly related to your question, but I do want to just make the point on EFS, so the exceptional financial support request that's gone into the Minister. It's gone in, I just need to be really clear, it is not approved. It is with the Minister for consideration, and what you are seeking is a minded to support letter before you go to full council. And the request in that is 630 million, well, in excess of 630 million, which pertains to your 22-3 year and 23-4 year. And that request of the Minister is built on the budget that you see in front of you today. So So I just want to be really clear. And, you know, obviously we are hopeful that that's a support that will be approved, but it is absolutely not guaranteed. It is pending, and, you know, obviously he's going to be assessing what happens in terms of the decisions that follow.
Okay, does that undo Councillor Bass? Yeah. I thank you very much. That's a very helpful strategy. I think you've heard tonight that I'm confident. I don't know anyone against the budget here tonight, and hopefully this the wider 49. I think that messages need to be heard too. So actually, that and working together to get to this stage, we've got a good 9.99. With a deal, the amount of money, the hardship on the compensation fund to anyone who, regardless of what there, we've also noticed that because we've realised that it's going down, we've actually reduced the amount of income. We've got a great council tax recovery. We've made sure of an allowance for that. It's a budget where there's 30 million disposals this year. I think thank you, commissioners, to making sure that's a reasonable amount of to actually make sure there's no fire sale. It mentions in that. Let's mention we get the right value to these asset disposals over a period. This is just making sure that we're not, as council, just selling anything willy-nilly. It's gone. We've got to disposal things. I think we all agree that some of these disposals this year are ones that we've agreed in cabinet 2 years ago. that we just need to get over the line. It's not cabinet or political decisions not to dispose of some of these. This is just we just need to move at a council on that pace. And I actually do thank on record the commissioners for the hard work that they've done, especially in the finance over the first year. I wouldn't have got here without the support of the 151 officer and the commissioners then I spoke to, because it was a revelation to me. And there's a learning curve as a leader, and there's a learning curve in finance, I can promise you that, of this sort of finances. And I'm glad we're moving away to a normal council. I know about bins and doors, and let's get back to running a council properly and running it efficiently. And let's get back to the stages where I see Thurrock as being a beacon of good practice of running a local authority, and that's where I want to get to. And I think that's achievable, all members. I think that is achievable in this if we move forward and take the right steps. Spillman, again, more than me.
Sorry, can I just thank Jonathan Wilson for his work on this. I know it's been mentioned in chamber. I'm sure it's a view that I hope all 49 councillors share. You know, the amount of hours you've put into this, whilst maintaining the optimism that you maintain, despite having not slept probably anywhere near, you know, the 8 hours that the rest of us should be sleeping. I'm sure commissioners agree as well. It's been incredible, and you should be, you know, it was a very difficult time, and you got called forward to deal with a very difficult situation, and you've done incredible, and we thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Obviously, it's not a solo effort, and very aware of the effort Ian, for example, has equally put into this process to date, but particularly note some of the finance team who I know you deal with as well in one of the other reports we've got coming tonight, so it's really kind of you to say that. Thanks.
Okay, any other questions, members? So, can I take that as the... Let's give it to the right page number. I'm going to go through. No, actually, she's more efficient than me. Oh my God, I'm not going to read it. I'm not going to read all the recommendations. Let's go through. So recommendations 1.1. So I'm going to take them on block if that's okay, members. Yeah. So recommendations 1.1 right the way through to 1.9. Did we? 1.9. Yeah. Sorry.
Leader, can I ask formally that it be moved and seconded and then voted on?
Okay. I move it. Who's going to second it? Yeah, go and second it, and then we're all going to vote on that. Oh, of course we are. Yep. Yep. Great. Thank you very much. We can move on to item 12, fees and charges. I think it's been mentioned already tonight. Oh, number 11. I thought we were in. Treasury management. Oh, we mustn't miss that. That's all. Treasury management. Sorry. Jonathan, on his own this time. Jonathan, we're looking forward to this one.
Thank you, Leader. So this treasury management strategy can seem quite an impenetrable document at face value, and certainly there are a number of indicators and such things within this that certainly don't lend it to an air of simplicity. But I think there is a simplicity to it, and I think as a Cabinet there's a number of issues we've been talking about throughout the process that are familiar concepts now to everybody, hopefully. And it's also really important to remember this strategy in the context of the original intervention and directions, because there were 3 directions that specifically attached to this. One is in itself a new strategy was required, and there are obvious reasons for that strategy, not least the scale of financial risk the Council was exposed to. In that context, the second direction that this strategy helps to address is the need for a strict reduction of debt. And the third concept that I think everyone's become much more familiar with than they probably ever thought they would be is the Council's MRP policy and the importance of that in the context of writing down debt. So all 3 of those items are covered in this strategy to an extent. The strategy itself is about cash flow management. It's about supporting the management of investment and borrowing, and it's about funding of the capital plans of the Council. So I think in terms of concepts, they're fairly straightforward concepts that hopefully all members will understand. This strategy is combined within it a number of sub-strategies. So we have a capital strategy, a borrowing strategy, a strategy for cash flow management, and implicit in that is an investment strategy as well. The capital strategy is what it sounds. It is our plans for capital coming forward. It basically looks at our capital programme, the programme contained within our budget report, and considers the funding of that going forward and the impact, obviously, ultimately on our borrowing. The planned expenditure is set out on page 36. To make very clear, this doesn't include any further planned commercial investment. And I know, hopefully, we all understand and know that, but it is obviously worth reiterating that a key part of this strategy is on that basis. However, as set out on page 39, it's important to note we retain £1 billion of investments, less the value of impairment that we've reflected in our accounts, subject to the ultimate divestment of those investments. So that balance is there to be managed throughout, and that is a key part of our strategy until we get to a point of divestment of those investments. That is matched by an equivalent level of borrowing, which then leads back to our borrowing strategy, which I'll come on to shortly. The wider direction around the reset of MRP, we've all seen in the budget, has a huge impact on the level of deficit we are facing in 23-4. It's a key figure in the 180 million. In fact, it's 74 million of it. This policy, in sections on pages 52 to 57 of your reports, sets the context for MRP in detail and resets our policy predominantly in respect to investments, and it's capital investments. So capital investments are now written down effectively over their lives in most cases, and that is generating that significant figure. So broadly, that applies to our solar assets, our wind farms, etc. Any wider equity investments tends to attach to a 20-year life. So, but again, it's a write-down of investment where previously there was none. We've talked about that in forums previously, and this makes us not just compliant with existing Prudential Code, but also ahead of future Prudential Code. We will still be compliant based on all discussions around the new code to date. That enables us, again, is a key part of quantifying and understanding our overall financial position, and again puts us perhaps slightly ahead of some wider authorities who are having to grapple with the changing rules with an existing strategy and probably an existing balanced budget. So we at least understand the scale of the problem and are taking steps to mitigate it. Others may find themselves having to deal with the same problem, but without being inside the mechanism we are to look at this. The strategy also includes a reassessment of something called the capital financing requirement. That term basically means our underlying need to borrow. So our capital plans are funded to the extent they're not funded by grants, not funded by Section 106, require borrowing. And it's a measure of how much borrowing we need. Now, actually, virtually all of our capital programme, whether it's investment or assets, is funded by borrowing. So our £1 billion of investments are all funded by borrowing. We've then got a further 500 million, which is split broadly, half HRA, half non-HRA. And that is also funded by borrowing. So there's no real gap between our need to borrow and our actual borrowing. And that is a risk until we start writing down our borrowing through MRP. And so in doing so, we are effectively writing down our assets. And if we had a similar exposure to that we've had previously, hopefully that will never happen, but we would have been protected had we written it down in that way to the extent we'd written it down. This currently provides an assessment of where we are, and as we divest of assets and borrowing equivalently, we would expect the numbers to fall. There is one slight spanner in the works to that, which is the capitalisation direction itself, because as it currently stands in our 20-year model, the sale of investments don't fully pay back the debt, and therefore we seek further capitalisation. So we've got a sort of ongoing capital problem to be resolved, which is back to this wider look and creating time to assess that and how that works over the future. Obviously, it links to the actual values. As Councillor Spillman mentioned, we don't know quite what the full value of sales will be. And we need to just work that through and understand that more fully with both the Commissioners and the Department. The borrowing strategy itself, as it sounds, then clearly links back to that activity and, as I've said, broadly matches that capital financing requirement. We have a plan within the report. It sets out on page 62 an assessment of the likely divestment of assets. But it's very much a holding position, as are many things in this report, because it's based on our assessment of the position as far as we know in the work we've done to date. However, there is hopefully positive news to come, and obviously if the Toucan situation is resolved, that would make a significant impact on our borrowing very quickly, and we hope that that will come forward within the next financial year. What's clear from the report throughout is that the borrowing cost is now unsustainable. Again, significant figure in our MCFS, 27 million, linking directly to increased interest rates, and therefore the speed of divestment enables us to address that issue and enable that to stop becoming another significant pressure. Alongside that, divestment obviously also reduces MRP charges and takes them out of the equation as they happen. However, until that happens, we continue to work within these parameters, and that's why there's such urgency attached to that activity. The other thing to note is the maturity of borrowing is important, and because we're in a holding position, we are not able yet to come to decisions about what our profile of borrowing and length of borrowing should be. Currently, we're seeking PWLB replacement debt for the historic short-term local authority borrowing, but it's very much impacted by the divestment strategy and timing. So as that becomes clearer and crystallises, it enables us to set a future borrowing strategy that then hopefully matches that divestment strategy and our wider capital plans. So we expect this strategy to come back for a refresh, and I would expect that would probably be mid-year, in addition to some of the items that Nicole mentioned in respect of the other pieces of work that are happening. Just to note within this, HRA funding is included in this, and HRA capital projects are planned to be funded by borrowing in specific cases. But just to note, the revenue consequences of that are not included in our general fund budget. They're managed within the HRA envelope, and indeed there's an HRA report later on the agenda. So the issues we have are all contained within this report, and this is really a holding position plus a projected plan to resolve some of those issues. But it is that holding position based on a series of assumptions, not least exceptional support itself, because that ultimately underpins everything we do going forward. And obviously there's assumptions about future exceptional support contained within here as mentioned. So hopefully that is a relatively simple explanation of the key things in this report. The wider indicators within that also show that current investments in the context of current interest rates do not deliver for the council anymore and further support that need for divestment. And the wider indicators obviously flag concerns about borrowing levels, which reference to CFO, which I've mentioned, and also indicate that MRP levels are unsustainable going forward and interest costs continue to be problematic. So I'll stop there, Chair, and take any questions.
Any questions? I've got a couple first. I've got a comment first. It's obviously like obviously, and thank you for saying this. A moving feast on page 62. That the 570 million. I'm assuming that is the percentage of that is going to be our win for the sale of the Toucan and coming in. So there could be opportunities for that into Q4 into the next financial year, not into 24-25. But that's a variable, and that will change that because that makes a big difference to interest payments if we can pay down as quick as possible. That's what the commissioners would like, and that's what I wanted as leader. As the quicker we can do that. And I know I've been bothering you all the time, mention it every week and publicly. I'm going to mention it again. I asked the same thing. How is it going? So I've realised that's what I want to make sure publicly that document looks like we're not doing it for another year or so. Commissioner.
So it's probably just worth reiterating. It's actually the directions from the Secretary of State that require you for your debt reduction. So we put commentary in the report about the progress against that, and require you to deliver a Treasury strategy and MRP policy. So it has responded to those specific directions.
Thank you. And moved me nicely on, which is my next question. When I first stopped, and this may be the first time, when I first met yourself and we looked at it, and I believe this is it wasn't compliant. And then to be showed that a document that's gone through numerous councils, full councils. In fact, one council it took 2.5 minutes because it is a big document and it's very complicated, and it's not people think, oh my, I made a joke about it now, and it's the most serious thing we're doing, and to be told that I voted on a non-compliant document, not once, not twice, but numerous times, all 49 of us, was a bit of a shocking revelation to me, and we're lay members here expecting that, and I was very surprised, and obviously now I'm going to reiterate in public. I hope this is a compliant document. So can we give that in public? We have asked the right questions. Remember now I've learnt this about this strategy.
Yes, I can confirm. We set out at the start of the strategy. There's a section on compliance for you at the front. So yes, that's the case.
Any further questions? Can we just, because I'm obviously concerned about, obviously the TRL is on here and there's an ongoing situation. We referred to reviews coming back into Q2, and obviously TRL is part of a review of this, and obviously you talk about holding investments, and we talk about that is still part of this Treasury swap investments, and it is whether that's, as actually mentioned here, the interest rates are reducing. It makes it much viable, and it needs to be an ongoing conversation of whether TRL is a viable in its form as it is.
Yes, this strategy obviously reflects what we're holding currently, and obviously the current plans of the authority. We obviously know the companies are subject to review in the forthcoming period, and I know more widely my colleagues are looking at viability of schemes and the future of TRL itself. So it's an ongoing position, and will be updated as part of a revised strategy.
Councillor Arnold.
Thank you. Thank you, Leader. I suppose really my question will come for Gareth more than anything. Sorry, Jonathan. Page 41, 4.2, I think that was, point 42, the table there about the skills and culture and things that that we need to look at and improve on and what you're doing about it. We did that training session the other night, and you were very clear about how important it was for all members to understand everything and that we've got investments, the council's investments, the types of investments, the security on those investments, the risk to those investments, and the liquidity of them. So I was wondering when we will get, or if it's being produced, a table of all investments so that members can clearly see them and understand those important key points in one document that we can look at in a format that members will understand.
We can get that to you very quickly. It'll take a couple of days to pull that together. But yeah, we can do that.
It's something we've been asking for.
Okay. Yep.
Chair, if I can just come in on that point, I think it's important that if officers are providing members with information, that you then need to speak out very loudly if you don't understand it. Because as an organisation, it's very easy for us to produce lots of papers and flood you with information. But it is your responsibility then, once you've got that information, if you don't understand it, you must come back. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, and I have. I mean, I've gone back to both Jonathan and Gareth personally on things, and I encourage all members to do that. And you're right, we do have a responsibility for that to improve our own skill set and recognise what we need within that skill set. But there's got to be a starting block.
Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Leader. One big word there, compliant. You brought that up earlier. You asked that question, is this a compliant document? And you said yes. He did, didn't he? But Nicole said this treasury management strategy has to be presented to us at certain points. It's a holding position. You said we're lucky to be inside a mechanism, which, I take your word for it, because I don't have any accountancy qualifications or treasury management qualifications. But because of what's happened in the past and how we are, I don't really want to wait till 1:45 to see this report. We have a monthly cabinet position or meeting. Can I not ask for an update every month, or at least if there's any kind of movement within that?
Yeah, thanks. Just on the point on compliance, I can categorically assure all members that the level of rigour and attention that's been applied to this strategy this year is greater than I think probably any other council in the country, for fairly obvious reasons. It's been externally reviewed by a number of people, including many external and independent experts. I will publicly thank Essex County Council for their support. It's not often we get documents that come back with, I think it was 264 comments on them about the robustness of the comments. To Councillor Arnold's point around that list of investments, in summary terms, it is covered in paragraph 32 of the report, but we're happily go into that in a bit more detail. And then the final point was
Frequency.
Yeah, frequency. Later on in the agenda, Cabinet is being asked to approve the terms of reference for the Strategic Investment Advisory Board, and I think that will be the place where we'll be able to give you the assurance, Councillor, that you're looking for.
Yeah, we want that to come here, to Cabinet.
The outcome and the conclusions from the Investment Advisory Board will be reported to Cabinet, yes.
Councillor Spillman.
Given that as recently as this municipal year, I was in a political cabinet with some of your predecessors, and I was given some assurance that we had a viable plan for a balanced budget and that the investments were, on the whole, performing as expected. Given that that was information that is now been shown to be laughable and wholly inaccurate, what assurances can you and even the commissioners give the people of Thurrock and members, not just of the Conservative group, but also the Labour group and also the Independent group, that the reports that we have before us aren't a complete and utter fantasy.
I can't speak of the sins of our forefathers. I can comment on, and I'll repeat the point about the robustness and the rigour that's been applied to this Treasury management strategy in particular. It's had a degree of attention that I've never seen, and I think this is my 18th Treasury management strategy. I've never seen anything of this attention applied before. It has been independently verified. It has been assessed by external experts. I can give you no greater assurance than that.
Commissioner.
Yes, sorry, I appreciate you asked for my view too. So I think on the Treasury strategy and the need for a compliant MRP policy, which is specific in the directions, I think that external accreditation through external advisors, experienced people connected with SIPFA too, who have advised on the code, I think has helped provide as much assurance as you could reasonably get in the time frame available that you've got a compliant Treasury strategy and MRP policy. And indeed, in becoming compliant, you have identified very significant costs. That is one of the reasons for the significant request in excess of 630 million in your exceptional financial support request. One of the very significant issues is the appropriate provision of MRP. I think more broadly, it would not be proper to say that there won't be further issues coming out. So I think, again, we have to be pragmatic, and this budget is based on the best information available to us at this time. But I would just highlight to you some elements of risk. You still have open accounts stretching back to 2021. And inevitably, having open accounts presents issues, and it might be that matters catch up with us. But insofar as we've been able to look into that, I think we've identified the issues that are available. There are also a couple of pieces of work that are pending, and we've previously reported on this to Cabinet, but I just want to highlight them again because they are pending, and it may require further budget adjustments based on what those reviews identify. And those are specifically on the HRA and your associated companies. Now, I don't say that to suggest that we've identified any issues. We haven't. But we need to complete the work, and I think a significant amount of work has gone on the diagnostics to identify where you are, but it is not yet 100%. So I just want to be clear, but I'm certainly confident that it covers all the material issues in the budget. So it is possible that there will still be adjustments in your budget, and we'd expect them to come through quarter 1, quarter 2.
Any other questions, members? No. Okay then, I'll move to, and I'm going to get to the end. It's page item 13, and then I propose 1.1 to 1.9. Does anyone second that with me? The Treasury Management Plan. Councillor Snell. Any voting for that? Agreed. Thank you very much. Now we can move on to item 12, fees and charges.
Thank you, Leader. So these are the fees and charges which will, subject to Cabinet approval, be effective from the 1st of April this year. Basically, we're budgeted to get back in 7.461 million back in fees and charges this year, which is a 4% increase on our anticipated recovery levels. You can see on the appendix there's a lot of work being done on the current fees strategy, but going through it, it was discovered that actually the policy wasn't all it could be, and it needs to be clearer. It needs to be put into more of a structure, and so therefore in quarter 1 we're going to be seeing another renewed fees and charges strategy. So there's not a huge amount to say on that at the moment. Obviously there are some fees and charges in there which could be contentious, so I'd be happy to take questions on those. The other thing is that directors are looking for us to delegate permission to them to vary the fees and charges throughout the year, should it become necessary or should it become obvious through the review that it needs to be done. So I'll leave it there and prepare to take questions. Thank you.
Any questions on fees and charges? Councillor Johnson.
Not on particular just on fees and charges, Chair, but I just wondered why all the delegated authorities going to officers. There doesn't seem to be any reference back to yourself on there.
Yeah, that's what it says, but obviously that will come through me first. So it won't be just a case of they'll do it willy-nilly. I'll get oversight on that. And should I feel that there's anything that Cabinet needs to be made aware of or brought back for our consideration, then I will insist upon that happening.
Leader, can I suggest you change the recommendation to in consultation, officers in consultation with the appropriate portfolio holder?
So in consultation with the Cabinet member. Yeah. Any other questions? No, you first. Councillor Arnold.
Thank you. More of a statement, I suppose, around the fees and charges. I think it's good that they're going to be reviewed. We've got to continue to be in a position where we're at least cost recovery, as we see the pressures on social care, adult social care, and those hourly rates going up. We do need to keep up with that. It's important to say, though, that it is still means tested, and those that are capped and can't afford it still won't be paying any extra. So it's important to keep that there. I would hope, as we've changed the recommendation, that as a portfolio holder, any fees and charges within adult social care would be discussed with me as well as yourself. So that's great. And I thought it was important to say about what's been removed as well as what's in there, because it was quite contentious last year about Meals on Wheels, and it's been mentioned in here that Meals on Wheels is now removed. I want to just reassure everybody that all those people that were receiving that service are still receiving a meal. It's just being done in a different way, and that's why that's being removed.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Arnold. I think that's important to note that, but again, everything is potentially to be reviewed. But I think it's important to note as well, as you say, that it's about cost recovery first and foremost. I mean, we've been well behind on that for a long time now, and we need to catch up on that. I know it's been contentious, but we've often kicked decisions down the road on this for political expediency, and I think this is another thing that we can't keep doing, because we end up in a situation where it's actually costing us money to run some of these things when it shouldn't be. It should be cost neutral at the very least. So I think that it is an important document, and it is right that it's looked at in greater depth and given more structure, so everybody knows where they stand, and it's a clear document for us all to look at, to understand, and to communicate to the residents.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I've just I was going to mention item 1. I draw your members to attention to 1.4, and I think this is because we go through budget once a year. Cabinet members think, and members and officers think, oh, that's over for this year, that we've got our set budget, we can now carry on and forget about Q1, Q2, and then the reporting back. And I think it's really good to this ongoing. It's that self-appraisal right the way through the year to see if we're doing, and if we make more savings, and get some more incomes in, and that's better instead of just doing it once a year. This big push from December to February budget, and then ignoring it for a year, and then thinking about it again. Oh my God, it's coming round again. I think there's a great recommendation. I think it should be throughout our documents, that ongoing check and challenge, and making sure we can find some more incomes or what's out and where we're doing the right thing, instead of just leaving it to 6 months before and going through a star chamber again and again and again, instead of that ongoing. So I do like that. I must ask a question, because obviously we're sitting in here and I see weddings and registrars and happy people walking in daily here, coming downstairs, and I see that there's £303,000 coming in this year. Do we know if that's up or down on the new registrars? But I've only just saw it just now. Yeah.
Thanks, Leader. Yeah, so that's an increase. Yeah.
thought it was, and it's quite nice to see happy brides coming in here. There's sometimes depressing walking in this building. So I'm every day sitting here, and Ian comes in with bad news for me every day. and so at least there's some happy things coming out of this building when I walk away. I don't know how for long though. Thank you very much. Oh, Councillor.
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of back you up there because I actually got married here this year. Well, last year, but not quite a year yet. So, and it was great. You know, the service was just brilliant. And people really do put themselves out to make brides' days really good here. So it's not just a dark, dingy registry office and somewhere you shouldn't be proud of getting married in. You should definitely come and check it out.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Oh, Councillor Maney.
Thank you, Chair. Just to draw your attention to something, actually. I mean, you've said right from the start when you became leader that you really want to listen to scrutiny and see what their feedback is, and I actually agree with you. And I've read all the feedback from the overview and scrutiny committees with interest because I think there's some interesting points made there. In relation to, I think one of the most contentious things in here at the moment is obviously the proposal to introduce charges for residents' parking permits. You wouldn't, if you read the feedback from PTR, you wouldn't have seen the minutes from the extraordinary meeting on the 26th of January. That has been circulated, but I do want to highlight the fact that they have specifically recommended that we don't progress with that. I respectfully disagree with that for reasons, you know, I'm happy to speak to when it comes to full council. But I didn't want you to read the report and think that PTR hadn't quite strongly commented on that. They had. An observation on that. I mean, I personally think it's fair to ask people to pay for a modest fee for a service that they receive. And this is a service. We are still, even with these modest charges that I'm proposing or Cabinet proposing, we're still going to be by far and away the cheapest in Essex, and in fact probably around the country when it comes to charging for parking permits. It's almost a notional fee, which I think is fair. That's not really a debate for here, but I just did want to point out that I think we should listen to scrutiny, we should take note of their observations, and within the body of this report, PTR's recommendation wasn't actually captured. It's been circulated late tonight, so if we can just make clear that we're mindful of that.
Thank you, and I think there is need to be a clear line to Cabinet about the scrutiny and how the scrutinies were happening day before, and I understand PTR at the next Cabinet meeting is day before, and there's some others issues, and I do think we need to get that, and I think that governance review that we've instigated before the start of this, and then if you look at the direction, the Minded To letter from the Minister, Secretary of State, was an important thing as well. We do need to tidy that up item here and get back to that, and I understand the pressures of getting this Cabinet on this, especially through budget and through finance before that. We will take a breath. We will look at that, and I think that is exactly what scrutiny should, to challenge that, to inform us and inform that, and if we've got Cabinet members and this Cabinet can make a decision and challenge. I think you've seen in Cabinet tonight, slightly different, where it's more we're asking questions in public to the senior officers, asking questions to ourselves and checking ourselves and challenging each other, and I think that's a good way to make decisions and a way we should be moving forward, and I welcome scrutiny at all levels. Any other questions? Okay, so I'm going to move to, with that extra recommendation in consultation with Cabinet members, and I'm assuming now there's news, our departing monitoring officer, I will recommend items 1 to 1.4, but who was second? Graham again, and then we can move to any approved Cabinet. Agreed. Thank you very much. And as we move on to item 13. Housing revenue account. Councillor Spielman.
I think it's a sign of the volatile times that we've lived in recently when I have to put forward a budget like this, really. I didn't think this is my second budget as housing Cabinet member for housing, and I didn't think last year that I'd be proposing an increase of 7% to rent and 11% to service charges and still be in deficit. But these are the days that we live in, unfortunately. The The recommended increase is 7%. That is a figure that was agreed by the department in consultation as set as a cap. If it had gone by the standard calculation that is used for rent setting, it would have been inflation plus 1, which I believe would be 11.1%. So it is considerably under inflation. And while it raises 2.974 million, we have an inflationary pressure on our budget of 4.269, and that still leaves a deficit of 1.295 million. So that's not ideal, to put it mildly. Now, thankfully, and I thank the whole team for the detail and the access that I was given to the budget making process. It was really, really helpful, and it was essential when we have to make tough decisions that, you know, I got to see detail down to a level that was really helpful to me, you know. And I thank Evelina and all of the rest of the staff for that. Mike Jones as well, he's put in a lot of work on this budget as well. But with that deficit, you know, we do have to make some tough decisions. And one of those tough decisions is leaving a number of vacancies open. Another tough decision is pausing some non-statutory programmes, and another very tough decision is increasing service charges by 10.1% in line with inflation. There are also increases to some other charges, such as garages, visitor rooms, and other issues. But for me, you know, I have to serve up and provide you with a balanced budget. X has to equal Y, and for that reason, I put these increases forward in order to protect services, and that's what is most valuable to me. This cabinet could have come out with, you know, much lower numbers just for posturing, but again, like the council tax decision, it would have been wholly irresponsible to do so, and that's the position that we take with this budget. Now, there are significant risks, just like with any budget, that need to be monitored. One close to my heart, which I see firsthand day to day, is the cost of the just surge in applications from homeless families. It's not just Thurrock. I see it in the local authority that I work for. Applications, you know, the chart is almost vertical at the moment. You know, there are slow periods that have, you know, traditionally been slower months that are now as busy as our busiest periods. It's a very difficult environment at the moment, and I'm glad that we've put the resource in previously, and God knows I'm glad that we did it now. I mean, that resource was done as a contingency, and if we hadn't put that in, we would have been in real trouble. I mean, the homelessness spend of this council is a fraction of what our neighbouring councils are, some of them. As a result, from temporary accommodation in the private sector, a lot of it out of borough. And that's credit to decisions that were made by officers and the capacity that was built. So I'm really pleased about that. You know, there are other risks regarding a lot of the regulations that are coming through, not just on building regs, but also, you know, we're going to have legislation soon on damp and mould. Now, I welcome that legislation wholeheartedly. It's about time that we had, you know, a more realistic and accurate view of the harm that damp and mould causes, but it is going to be a significant expense. The other risk that we've got is in the borrowing costs, which won't just affect our ability to build, but are going to affect our capital programme across the board. You know, every repair we do now has got an extra expense on it. because most of our capital work is, we utilise borrowing to make that happen, a lot of it. There were a lot of projects that were viable a year ago and were very, very exciting that are now underwater. And it's not just that those projects don't get built, it's the fact that we now have to maintain some of the buildings in the borough that we would have been looking to no longer house people in as well, as a result of the fact that we can't regenerate at the speed that we would have liked. I had some incredibly, they weren't published, but it had some early discussions about some quite major regeneration this time last year. Those plans are now tragically not possible as a result of the borrowing costs and interest rates. They are so, they're so underwater that the conversations aren't worth having at the moment. So there are, a lot of risks, and we have to be very mindful. But I think the best way to, the first line of defence against mitigating those risks is to set a responsible budget. And I do believe that in this budget we have done so. So I open up to questions, and again, and I thank the team for all the hard work that they've put in producing this budget, and for the input that I've had at every level. So thank you very much.
Any questions or comment? Oh, Kaiser.
Thank you for your report, and as you have rightly mentioned, there is a rise in homelessness applications and so many other things. You have just, obviously, you are proposing this increase of 7%, but at 2.7%, you are estimating a bad debt, an increase of almost 100% from 0.67 million to 1.253 million. So how that would justify this increase, and if even will increase this, and with this increased bad debt, so what would be the actual difference?
But the inevitability of the financial crisis that we're in, like nationwide, and the inflationary pressures means that some of our residents are going to have to, are going to find it hard to pay. And I think that like speaking to Mr. Mike Jones, like the level of bad debt contingency that we've put into the budget is generous. Yeah. So just to make sure that we don't, that we're realistic. So I mean, I would hope that given this council's, the rent team, the rent team in this council have historically been absolutely fantastic. I mean, they're a credit. The financial inclusion side of within the housing has been top drawer. So I hope that we can avoid the sort of figures that are in there. But that is a realistic contingency of a worst case scenario. I don't know if Evelina wants to make any extra comments on that.
Thank you, Councillor Spillman. Thank you for the question, Councillor Abbas. No, it's exactly as you said. This is the worst case scenario. We want to ensure that we stress test that budget, and that's really there to provide for that. We've not needed to really rely on bad debt provision so far, touch wood, but with the obviously cost of living crisis that we are experiencing, we are prepared for every eventuality.
Thank you. Any other questions? Oh, Councillor Snell.
Thank you, Leader. I'm just inquiring with whether within the budget constraints that you've got, the Blackshots development can still go ahead or whether it can't.
I know we've had quite a lot of consultation with commissioners on this, and they've looked at plans as well, and we've looked at it in detail. I hope, and I will be very, very proud to deliver a paper to next cabinet on that. But there is still some consultation with ward members, one of whom is sitting with me today, and so I'm not going to be as forthcoming as I would like to be, because there is still some consultation to be had. But I'm sure that Councillor Maney's, quite excited about getting those I's dotted and those T's crossed, just as I am. But no, I hope to bring a very exciting paper to the next cabinet. That's my hope. Yeah.
Anyone else to comment on that? No. Okay then. So we move to recommendations. I move the recommendations 1.1 to 1.6. Does anyone second that? I think you should.
I think I will.
Thank you very much. Okay, then, in favour of them? Thank you. Right, brilliant. We can move on then to my paper, isn't it? Yeah, that's right. We're moving on to actually item 14 is mine. Yes, as I say. It's a long. This is. I welcome this new advisory panel. It makes me sad. One thing about this paper, the Councillor Hebb, who is the long-term finance member there, called for such a group and oversight committee for many times. I remember in many committees, he took it to corporate numerous times, and he was delayed in his wishes and failed in his wishes. And I'm hoping to deliver this today. And it underscores my wish to be open and transparent. And this council that we should have had this many years ago. That may not have made any changes. That we don't know that, but at least there should have been an open and transparent that we could actually see our decisions and what was happening, where it's going. And we've just discussed that tonight about our investments and what they are and how they're performing. Is public. People can read it and don't have to put FIIs in. And I'm hoping this committee can move forward at a pace. And it can be more answerable to members and media alike. Any comments?
Thank you, Leader.
Yeah.
I think if anyone was any doubt or question about your commitment to openness and transparency, it's finally getting this committee in place. As you said, Councillor Hebb had been calling for this for a long, long time and was obstructed. So I think, I hope those that are recording this can see that this is a huge step forward and should be welcomed.
I just to thank the commissioners and their help in actually moving this forward and actually working with the monitoring officer to get the paper here, because I think it's come at an early time. We wanted it as early as possible. We've heard tonight that we're not doing any investments, but we will have a TAL that's going to be here sometime, and it needs to. We can't go back to the old way of working and the treasury management, and that's what I'm hoping this committee will work for, this advisory panel. Councillor Arnold.
Thank you, Leader. I actually circled 2.6, 2.7 and 4.1 as being like bingo for the things that came into my head of what was needed. I think this is a really positive and proactive measure going forward as part of the recovery plan and going forward with the investments and understanding them. The question I have was around the terms of reference. There's no mention in there of expectations of members of that panel or training, and whether there should be some kind of mandatory training like there is for corporate parenting. I would expect to see a level of competence expected around those sitting on that panel.
I expect the same. I think I asked the question to the monitoring officer about this and about how we can deliver some good training and make sure it's of quality training. And I think that's still part of the constitution training we're going to work through and how it. And I hope you're noted that, and we can actually work to give you something. I think, are you squeezing to come in now?
Yes, just to confirm, Chair and members, that 3.7 of the report refers to an expectation of members to undertake specialist training, and also that there's a reference in the report to the ability to bring specialist people in to support members on a very specialist subject matter. So I think those 2 points are worth noting.
Yeah, I mean, I did see all of that in the report, but not in the terms of reference that members will receive to set out for them what will be expected.
If that's formally moved, we will include those in the terms of reference.
Yep, we'll put that into the minutes, into the formally move that inside there. Any other comments? Councillor Maney.
Thank you, Leader. 2 quick questions. Thanks. 2 quick questions. One, What will this panel's relationship be with corporate ONS? Will it report to that and then via us, or how will we ensure they don't sort of overlap? And like the other question I've got in relation to the panel meeting quarterly, I know it says under that the special meetings can take place, but I just wonder whether initially quarterly meetings are enough.
I think we need to have an initial meeting, and I would leave that at the chair's discretion once we've moved through to that. I think at the first point, I think it depends on workload, and I think it's very much like how I see it working like a general services. There's an expectation it meet quarterly, but there's also an expectation that the workload will be workload specific as comes in, and it may be working weekly in certain issues or day like we've done before we had this, where we was waiting. Seemed to be hourly at one point, and it feels wrong that I was only in the old where I was working under previously. It was just myself and the corporate chair, and I remember talking to you, Councillor Snell, before you was on cabinet about the issues that we were raising continuously and making sure we've got engagement. So I think that would leave that to the chair's discretion, but the expectation it will be meeting more. Any other comment?
I'm just interested to know what its relationship will be with corporate ONS.
Obviously, this is an advisory body, and I expect it to feed into both cabinet and corporate, and give its public advice about this. So actually, it's not. It's exactly what it says on the tin. It's not a committee, and the corporate is the over in scrutiny of this, but it's an advisory body specifically to deliver good, sound understanding of that, and the people on there should be financially competent and wanting to be there.
Thank you, Leader. I think there's always the opportunity for overruling scrutiny to ask for a report on the activities, and I think that would be quite appropriate to give it that level of oversight. But you're quite right. The intention of this body is to advise yourself and Cabinet.
I see this body very much like the Lower Thames Crossing Task Force, which comes back here. So we hope with that, but obviously General Services and any other committee that would be happy to demand, because Lower Thames Crossing have been going task forces, and I can see it working like that. But this is a highly skilled thing that we would be missing, and I think Councillor Head wanted this. I remember going to corporate about it a year before last or something, and a couple of times we've been trying to bring it forward. So I'm glad it's here today. So any other questions? Otherwise, Councillor Bass.
Thank you for your report. Obviously, this was much needed. Obviously, you asked this question previously as well, informally. But is there any limit on number of co-optees members? Or is there any also limit on allowances?
Go on. There's allowances, not mine.
I'm not sure if I understood the question as such.
Is there a limit on co-optees? Because at 3.1 it says option to co-opt non-members to bring on expertise or non-commissioner to the panel, if so desired.
I think it depends on the subject matter the members, the group is considering. I think the intention for co-optees is to bring that level of expertise in for the specific matters. So as it is now, it does say co-optees as desired, but if that means as needed on speciality.
Is that satisfied? And I can answer the question about the remuneration you said, didn't you? Yeah. So I think that's an independent remuneration panel that will come through as we do. I think later in the next financial year, there is due every 4 years, and we do some remuneration that will be part of our committees, and it'll be structured. The independent committee will look at that remuneration of that committee. Is that correct? Thank you. With that, I move to recommending items 1.1 and 1.2. Would you like it? Seconded. They are. Thank you. Any agreed? Thank you very much. And we move forward. And with that, I would like to formally. But first of all, I'd like to thank our monitoring officer. I think it's his last time. I think he's been invaluable help to me over the last 3 months, and I wish him well, and thank you for your help. Obviously, you've been invaluable to me, and I'm giving that sage legal advice and advice that I wouldn't have had. And you stood up to what you interviewed that day, and thank you very much for your time there last week. It's been well worth it for me. Thank you. I close the meeting. Thank you.